Efforts to protect the critically endangered orange-bellied parrots once prompted former Premier Jeff Kennett to refer to the birds as trumped-up corellas. But despite the work of authorities in 3 states, the parrots' fortunes have continued to spiral downwards, and it could be extinct in just 3 years. The small ground-dwelling bird's only hope for survival now rests with a drastic strategy. Matthew Stanley with the story.
The future of the orange-bellied parrot looks as bleak as the weather that greets Peter Menkhorst and Craig Morley as they step ashore on a swampy island in Lake Connewarre. The birds were once found across Victoria, but the Saltmarsh Islands on the Bellarine Peninsula are the only place they've been spotted this year.
You'll head across that way and I'll go out on that way.
Yeah, and I'll meet up with you.
Where will we meet?
Over there by the lignum bushes.
The lignum, all right then.
All right.
But today the pair search in vain.
Yeah, the only movement out here are white-fronted chats.
It's little wonder. The parrots are now considered functionally extinct in the wild, with numbers so low they won't recover on their own.
It's probably the most endangered bird in Australia.
Orange-bellied parrots breed in southwest Tasmania and migrate to Victoria and South Australia in winter. These pictures were taken at Melaleuca in Tasmania 2 years ago. But since then, numbers have fallen from around 150 to just 50, as the females suddenly stopped laying eggs.
So there's not a mortality cause that's killing birds. It's just that the females aren't producing eggs. And maybe that's a habitat quality thing. Maybe they're not getting to good enough condition to breed.
I don't think there's dry land between here and the table.
No, I think this is probably the best part.
Just deeper and shallower.
With the species racing towards the brink, the orange-bellied parrot recovery team has come to Lake Connewarre as part of a desperate last-ditch attempt to save it from extinction.
So all we want every day when the weather's reasonable...
When the weather's reasonable, yes.
Just a sprinkle of... the water actually helps to keep it in place. Just a sprinkle of seed.
Rightio.
That will be visible to parrots flying over. And because they're used to feeding on a nest, on a feed table down at Melaleuca, hopefully they'll recognise that seed and come in.
The plan is to capture about a third of the birds remaining in the wild in the hope of rescuing the captive breeding program that needs an urgent injection of new genes if it's to carry the future of the species.
It seems like a big risk to take such a big chunk of the few birds that do remain in the wild out of the wild?
Certainly it is, yeah. But the situation is so dire. We stand to lose everything, and we're taking a risk of maybe hastening the decline of the wild population, certainly, but it's to improve the captive population so that we have potential in the future to reintroduce captive bred animals to the wild.
So I can come in here in the morning and I can sit down in front of this computer screen and I can turn it on and I can see exactly what's going on inside the nest. This allows us to make management decisions very quickly and judge whether or not these birds are being cared for correctly, and we can intervene if necessary very fast.
Hillsville Sanctuary hosts one of 3 captive breeding programs that began 17 years ago and together hold about 160 orange-bellied parrots.
We're really fortunate that we've established what I call is the breeding recipe for orange-bellied parrots. So all the little things that you need to do in captivity to make sure that they breed, we've already worked those out, so we're well ahead with this program.
But while the program, which began with just 6 birds, has had considerable success, inbreeding has begun to take its toll.
In captivity, we find that we have 100% participation rate by pairs, so they all go into the nest box and they all lay eggs. A lot of the eggs that are laid are infertile.
Time is critical at the moment. We need to make sure that some of the genes that are represented in the wild make it into captivity so that we don't lose them forever. And actually finding those little birds, these tiny little guys out in the wild, and being able to then catch them and bring them in is a giant task in itself.
The recovery teams enlisted dozens of volunteers as it attempts to locate the few remaining wild birds for capture.
Usually you first see them as they're flying away from you. They're hard to see when they're on the ground. But if you flush them, you recognise their distinctive call that they give. That's a diagnostic feature of them, and and you just follow them with your binoculars to see where they land and then creep up on them.
With fertility problems in both the wild and captive populations and the gene pool already so limited, it could already be too late. But the recovery team is pinning its hopes on buying enough time to give the birds another chance.
If you can overcome the problems in the wild and then put birds back out there, that can be a really successful strategy, and it has worked, but it does take a lot of effort, a lot of time and a lot of resources.
And if you'd like to help the recovery team, go to the Birds Australia website and follow the links.